This companion beast's name is the Sky God Crane. It was sent here by an epic expert, Lu Jiayuan. This Sky God Crane's speed is extremely fast. Furthermore, its life providence and life soul are pretty good. Qin Ziyuan held Zhou Wen's hand as he warmly introduced the companion beasts in basement 4. Zhou Wen felt odd. He was clearly here to buy a speed crystal, so why did Qin Ziyuan introduce these companion beasts to him? Zhou Wen had tried to emphasize the purpose of his visit several times, but he couldn't find a chance to interject. In fact, when Ouyang Lan brought Zhou Wen here, she had already told him everything. However, with Qin Ziyuan's enthusiasm, Zhou Wen could only patiently listen. Without realizing it, the two came to the room with the chained silver-haired companion beast. After entering the room, Qin Ziyuan suddenly said to Zhou Wen, do you know that you are in danger? Old Master Qin, what do you mean? Zhou Wen looked at Qin Ziyuan in confusion. Qin Ziyuan looked outside and saw that Ah Sheng was still guarding the 4th-level entrance. He whispered to Zhou Wen, everyone in Luang City knows that little Lan married another man, but they don't know much about that man. At most, they know his surname is Zhou, much less know that he has a son named Zhou Wen. Then how did you know about me? Zhou Wen asked Qin Ziyuan. It was Ouyang who told me. He said that he thinks highly of you and you are outstanding. If possible, he hopes that you can take over his job in the future, said Qin Ziyuan. What job? Zhou Wen looked at Qin Ziyuan in confusion. Qin Ziyuan smiled bitterly and said, Ouyang is still as cautious as ever. He thought highly of you but didn't tell you anything. The former principal has indeed praised me for my talent, but that was just a casual remark. Don't treat it seriously. Zhou Wen paused and looked at Qin Ziyuan. Old Master Qin, doesn't the former principal study history? I'm not familiar with this area and am not very interested in it. You must have heard wrongly that the former principal asked me to take over his job, right? It can't be wrong. Ouyang gave you the passcode, right? Did you see the metal slab over there? Enter the code. The items inside were all left by Ouyang. They should be of some help to you, Qin Ziyuan said as he pointed behind the silver-haired companion beast. What he was referring to was the metal slab with the ship's anchor emblem engraved on it. The last time Zhou Wen came, he had seen the keypad on it. He guessed that it might be a password lock, but he never expected it to be true. Despite having those thoughts, Zhou Wen's expression remained stoic as he feigned surprise. Old Master Qin, what password are you talking about? Didn't Ouyang give you the passcode? That's bad. It's all the things he left for you. You can't open without the passcode, so you can only wait for him to return, Qin Ziyuan said as he stared at Zhou Wen. The former principal left something for me. He even wants me to take over his job. Why haven't I heard him mention it before? I'll have to ask him when he returns, Zhou Wen said. Did Ouyang really not tell you anything? Qin Ziyuan asked in surprise. Back when the former principal was still in Guide High School, he often chatted with me, but he didn't leave anything for me. Also, what was the danger that you mentioned? Zhou Wen asked Qin Ziyuan. The things Ouyang left for you are very important. If others know that you have the items, it will definitely be disadvantageous to you. So you must hide them well and not let anyone see them. Qin Ziyuan said sternly. What are the things? The puzzlement on Zhou Wen's face wasn't faked. He really didn't know what the former principal had left him. Since you don't know anything, that can be considered a good thing. Forget it. Since Ouyang didn't tell you the details, let's wait until he comes back. Qin Ziyuan saw that Zhou Wen didn't seem to be faking it, so he didn't say anything else and left the room with the silver-haired companion beast. When Qin Ziyuan closed the door, Zhou Wen glanced at the silver-haired companion beast. Just like the last time he came, the companion beast was still sitting there with his head lowered. His long silver hair covered his face, masking his appearance. However, Zhou Wen had a nagging feeling that a pair of eyes were staring at him behind the waterfall like silver hair. Furthermore, they were smiling at him. After leaving basement 4, Qin Ziyuan got someone to give him the speed crystal which Zhou Wen needed. He gave him a very high discount and eventually, Zhou Wen paid 138,000 for the 21 valued speed crystal. On the way back, Zhou Wen's mind wasn't on the speed crystal. Is the number on the name card really from the former principal? Is that string of numbers really used to open the metal slab? Zhou Wen was extremely puzzled as he felt that something was amiss. Therefore, when Qin Ziyuan said those words, Zhou Wen only pretended not to understand anything. In fact, he really didn't quite understand. Sir, what's going on? Zhou Wen was filled with doubt. After Zhou Wen left his store, Qin Ziyuan sat on a chair in his office. He was using the mouse to click on the video and repeatedly replayed the entire conversation he had with Zhou Wen. After watching for a while, Qin Ziyuan muttered to himself, it looks like I'm overthinking things. This kid really doesn't know. Who did that old fool Ouyang pass the passcode to? He didn't even tell his own daughter. Could that old fool have wanted that thing to die together with him? After returning to his dorm, Zhou Wen took out the 21 valued speed crystal and attempted to snap a picture to put it inside the game. It was very dangerous to directly absorb stat crystals that exceeded one's level. Although Zhou Wen's body was powerful, he wasn't willing to take the risk. Furthermore, Zhou Wen was somewhat worried. A legendary stage definitely had its limits, but he didn't know what the limit was. A person's limit was 18. His was clearly higher than the average person's, but he had no confidence in reaching 21 points. The speed crystal successfully entered the game. The moment the blood-colored avatar touched it, it immediately transformed into a stream of light that fused into the blood-colored avatar's body. It made Zhou Wen feel as though a force had fused into his muscles, strengthening them. The blood-colored avatar's speed quickly increased by 1 point and became 19. Soon, it increased by another point and became 20. However, when the speed crystal was completely absorbed by the blood-colored avatar, his speed stat stopped increasing. Zhou Wen's heart skipped a beat. He knew what he was most worried about had happened. His legendary stats hit the limit at 20 points, so he was unable to increase his speed to 21 points. Unless he advanced to the epic stage, he wouldn't be able to learn the Dragon Gate Flying Immortal skill. Article 192 of 1597. Chapter 192 Hope of Breaking Through. At the mortal stage, the Lost Immortal Sutra simulated 4 types of primordial energy arts to boost my stats to 11 points. But now, those primordial energy arts have already reached the legendary stage, but it hasn't increased my stats. How do I have my stats break through to 21 points? Zhou Wen frowned in thought. Zhou Wen, I heard you are representing the Yin family and will be heading to the Holy Land. Li Xuan ran over and sized up Zhou Wen. Yes, I just decided to go yesterday. How did you know? Zhou Wen asked. It's almost time to enter the Holy Land, so the League has already released the list with your name on it. The Yin family sure treats you well. They actually gave you this spot. Li Xuan was very surprised. He never expected the Yin family to give the spot to Zhou Wen. If I didn't have to go, I really wouldn't have gone, Zhou Wen thought to himself, but there was no point in saying that now. Therefore, Zhou Wen only asked, does that mean you are going to? Li Xuan curled his lips and said, if brother were to talk to me nicely, I might have even given it to him. However, with what he has done, I'll definitely not let him get his wish. By the way, how are you getting to the Holy Land? Let's go together. We can join forces and forge a path of blood together. Each of us will obtain a special physique and return. Later, we will then have a mythical pet. Li Xuan rattled on. Have you thought about which type of physique you will be vying for? Different physiques have different primordial energy art requirements. You have to cultivate the corresponding primordial energy art to have a possibility of passing. Just as Zhou Wen was about to answer, his eyes suddenly lit up as he thought to himself, that's right. Why didn't I think of it? Although the Lost Immortal Sutra has the power to confuse immortals and Buddhas, making those immortals and Buddhas think that I have a special physique, I actually do not have one. Could the special physiques in the Holy Land allow my body to exceed the limits of the legendary stage? With this in mind, Zhou Wen suddenly felt that his trip wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Hey, what are you doing? I'm asking you a question, Li Xuan said as he waved his hand at Zhou Wen when he saw him looking down in a daze. Ah Sheng will be taking me there. Zhou Wen snapped out of his daze and explained. Then tell Ah Sheng to take one more person. I'll go with you for company, Li Xuan said. It shouldn't be a problem. I'll inform him later, but there will be trouble plaguing me. If you come with me, I'm afraid it won't be too peaceful, Zhou Wen said. People live in this world to resolve all kinds of trouble. There's no point fearing it. All right, I'll head back to pack up. Li Xuan bade farewell and left. Zhou Wen called Ah Sheng, but he never expected Ah Sheng to say, young Master Wen, it's best if you don't go with Li Xuan. Why? Zhou Wen asked in puzzlement. There are some internal problems with the Li family. I'm afraid that it won't be safe on our trip. Ah Sheng wasn't too direct, but Zhou Wen knew that the problem he was referring to was probably Li Xuan's second brother, Li Mobai. I'm also in trouble. Li Xuan isn't afraid of trouble, so what's there for me to be afraid of? Zhou Wen said with a smile. After hanging up, Zhou Wen went to Old Dragon Cave. Ah Sheng could help him apply for a leave of absence, but Zhou Wen still wanted to inform Wang Mingyuan and company before he left. When Zhou Wen arrived at the laboratory, he saw the rare sight of Zhongzia, Hui Haifeng and Zhang Yan there. Furthermore, Zhongzia wasn't sleeping and Zhang Yan wasn't reading. The three of them were playing cards. Not seeing Wang Mingyuan, Zhou Wen asked, where's teacher? He's down Dragon's Well. He should be back soon, Hui Haifeng answered. Zhou Wen couldn't help but worry when he heard that Wang Mingyuan had gone into Dragon's Well again. Hui Haifeng and company had never seen the dragon at the bottom of Dragon's Well, but Zhou Wen had experienced it deeply. Although Wang Mingyuan was at the epic stage, he might not be a match for the dragon. Sitting by the side and watching the trio play cards, he felt that something was amiss. Zhou Wen couldn't figure out how the trio was playing, despite watching for quite some time. Zhongzia had thrown a 7 and Hui Haifeng had thrown an 8, but Zhang Guan threw a 5. No matter how he thought about it, 5 wasn't bigger than 8. What kind of game are you playing? Zhou Wen asked in puzzlement. Just a random game, Hui Haifeng said with a smile. Zhongzia continued, there's no point in playing a proper game of cards. This is called reverse. We'll select one person to play cards in reverse while the other two play normally. This was the first time Zhou Wen saw that cards could be played this way. He found it more interesting as he watched. A clearly big card was used as a small card in Zhang Yan's hand, while his smallest 3 to 5s all became the biggest cards. However, playing cards in such a way made it prone to confusion, especially for an ordinary person. However, the three of them played with relish and never made any mistakes. After waiting for more than an hour, Wang Mingyuan came out of Dragon's Well. Zhou Wen recounted how he was going to the Holy Land. I didn't expect the Yin family to give you the nomination. If you really want to go, you have to be careful. Hui Haifeng spoke up first. Seeing Zhou Wen's puzzled expression, Hui Haifeng said with a smile, back when Tianzuo was about the same age as us, he went to the Holy Land. He didn't obtain any special physiques, but he beat the descendants of the 6 heroes who went to the Holy Land one after another. He caused all the descendants of the 6 heroes to fall out and none of them obtained any special physiques. This resulted in a great feud. As a representative of the Yin family, you will likely be targeted. Zhou Wen was dumbfounded when he heard that. Only then did he know that the trouble Ouyang Lan mentioned was really troublesome. Why didn't Tianzuo do that? Zhou Wen asked. Rumor has it that Tianzuo was too arrogant. He said that it was meaningless for the descendants of the 6 hero families to get the special physiques every time, so he beat them to a pulp and made them have to quit. But this is just a rumor. Only the real people involved know the truth, Hui Haifeng said. If you don't have to go, it's best you don't go. A special physique might not necessarily be good, Song Zia said with a twitch of his lips. I've already promised the Yin family, Zhou Wen said. You'll have to go if you have promised, but after you get there, you must take note of someone called Lance, said Zhang Yan. What's so special about that person? Zhou Wen asked. Lance is also a descendant of the 6 heroes. Although his fame isn't as great as John's, he's thousands of times more terrifying than John. With your abilities and companion beasts, it won't be difficult for you to deal with the descendants of the other 6 heroes, but if you encounter this person, you have to be careful. Zhang Yan said very seriously without any intention of joking. Lance, I'll remember him. Zhou Wen repeated the name Zhang Yan mentioned and silently memorized it. Article 193 of 1597. Chapter 193 Qin Mountain. When Zhou Wen left, there was a necklace around his neck. Although it was a necklace, it was actually a red string with a bead carved from ivory. This was given to him by Wang Mingyuan, who claimed to have made it personally. He originally planned on giving each of them one after making all 4. Since Zhou Wen was leaving for some time, he wanted to give him the completed one first. The next morning, Ah Sheng came to fetch Zhou Wen and Li Xuan, and Ouyang Lan came over. Before leaving, she specially exhorted Zhou Wen, Little Wen, I'm not worried about your strength, but I'm afraid that you might be careless. After you reach the Holy Land, you have to be careful of the descendants of the 6 heroes. The grudge from back then between Tianzuo and the 6 heroes is so deep they will definitely target you. Remember, safety first. It's nice to obtain a special physique, but it doesn't matter if you don't. Sis Lan, I understand. Zhou Wen nodded slightly. If this were in the past, Zhou Wen wouldn't have taken the special physique to heart, but in order to break through, Zhou Wen had to vie for it. Zhou Wen originally imagined that they were taking a plane to the Holy City, but to his surprise, Ah Sheng drove them out of Luang City without heading to the airport. Brother Sheng, isn't it too slow by car? Li Xuan didn't dare call him Ah Sheng, so he called him Brother Sheng. Previously, Li Xuan had told Zhou Wen that although In Sheng was only picked up by Tianzuo and was not a true member of the Yin family, and Tianzuo treated him like a brother. In the Yin family, he was Ah Sheng, but outside In Sheng's name was frightening. This was ordered by Madam. There are many routes to choose from, so the roads are safer. Furthermore, there are a few dimensional zones. I want you to visit them before heading to the Holy Land, answered Ah Sheng. Which dimensional zones? Li Xuan was intrigued. The nearest place is in Qin Mountain. I don't know what the name is, Ah Sheng answered simply. However, Li Xuan's expression changed when he heard the name. Brother Sheng, don't tell me you are really letting us enter the dimensional zone at Qin Mountain. I heard that the dimensional zones there are really terrifying. Without being at the epic stage, entry means death. It's not that exaggerated. About 90% die, Ah Sheng said. Is there a difference? Li Xuan cursed inwardly. Zhou Wen didn't know much about this, so he asked, is Qin Mountain terrifying? Is it terrifying? Remove that questioning tone, and that's more like it. That's where the great horror lies. Have you heard of the legendary Kunlun? Li Xuan said with a twitch of his lips. Didn't Ah Sheng say he was going to Qin Mountain? What has it got to do with Kunlun? Zhou Wen was somewhat puzzled. The legendary Kunlun of ancient myths refers to Qin Mountain. It doesn't point to the present-day Kunlun mountain range. Qin Mountain is also a dragon vein of East District, basically the best geographical location. The dimensional zones there are extremely terrifying, and there are countless powerful dimensional creatures inside. Humans are nothing there. Even top human experts have to tread carefully inside like they are treading on thin ice. If they aren't careful, they might perish, much less us legendaries. Li Xuan asked another question after he was done. Brother Sheng, are you really taking us to the dimensional zone in Qin Mountain? Yes, Ah Sheng answered simply. Li Xuan suddenly realized that coming with Zhou Wen was a wrong decision. It didn't mean that he was afraid of going to the ruins. No matter how dangerous that place was, Ah Sheng wouldn't bring them to their deaths. However, along the way, Ah Sheng drove without saying a word while Zhou Wen gamed on his phone, leaving him bored out of his wits. Is that stupid game really that fun? You've been grinding ants the entire journey. How many ants have you killed? Did the ants provoke you? If you really hate it so much, just find a real ant and kill it. Why do you have to seek revenge on it? Li Xuan said gloomily. Yeah, Zhou Wen replied before continuing grinding. Li Xuan was instantly rendered speechless. He had no way of communicating with Zhou Wen, so all he could do was lean back into his seat and sleep. Zhou Wen had been trying to kill the golden flying ant or break the white cocoon it was protecting. Unfortunately, the golden flying ant was too fast, so he could do neither. However, grinding for some companion eggs to feed his pets was not a bad choice. He could try his luck at companion beast fusion. The success rate of a fusion was really low. The success rate for the first fusion was the highest. After every fusion, the success rate plummeted. As for how much it decreased, it depended on the pet species. Due to the existence of the Grand Yin Wind skill, Zhou Wen could quickly grind ants. Many ant eggs dropped, so Zhou Wen began to wonder if he could come up with an ant that could both fly and provide defense. It would have high speed and high defense. Therefore, Zhou Wen had been using companion eggs of the black-winged flying ants and the red-armored ants all this time. He had succeeded quite a few times, but none of them could satisfy Zhou Wen with their stats and skills. Red-armored, yellow-armored, blue-armored ants each have a defensive primordial energy skill. I'll first do fusion until I get an ant with 3 skills, then I'll combine it with a black-winged flying ant, allowing it to have the ability to fly. That way, I'll need at least 3 fusions. The success rate is just too low. Zhou Wen tried many times. Skills were either lost after the fusion or the fusions failed. It was especially so for the third fusion. The chances of success were too low. There was only a little more than an 11% chance of success. He had lost count of the number of times he had attempted fusion, but they all failed. Thankfully, there were many ant eggs. Zhou Wen didn't have anything else to do on the way, so he slowly fused them. When the car entered the mountainous region, it was very rare to see people in cars. In this era, due to the appearance of the dimensional zones, many roads were blocked. Traveling between cities was actually a very difficult matter. If an ordinary person were to accidentally enter a dimensional zone, the probability of surviving was extremely low. Currently, there weren't many civilian operations for the transportation of goods. The main reason was that the League's military was doing it. Even so, there were still many accidents every year. Most of the time, people along with their vehicles would disappear. Search and rescue teams didn't even have a clue where to begin. As the car drove along the mountain road, Zhou Wen, who was gaming, suddenly felt his eardrums hurt. The window shattered at the same time as the tires burst. Accompanied by an explosive sound, he heard a strange shriek. The car lost control and swerved into the railing of the mountain road as it began to spin off the road. Ah Sheng suddenly wound down the car window and with one foot on the mountain road, he forcefully stopped the car. It was as if the car had been nailed to the ground, leaving it less than a meter away from the cliff. Zhou Wen and Li Xuan were given a fright as they subconsciously looked out onto the mountain road. They saw a golden glow dancing in the middle of the mountain range. On a closer look, it was a giant bird that was as golden as a phoenix. It was dancing through the mountain like a golden sun. The bird's cry from before came from it. Article 194 of 1597. Chapter 194 Car flying through the empty sky. Fuck, is that a phoenix? Li Xuan asked in surprise. Don't speak, don't move, don't make any sound, Ah Sheng said in a low voice. Zhou Wen and Li Xuan felt a baffling sense of pressure when they saw Ah Sheng being so cautious. They sat in the car without daring to move, but their eyes were focused on the dancing giant bird in the mountains. The giant bird flew very leisurely, like a golden cloud floating in the middle of a mountain. It leisurely bobbed up and down in the sky, like an elder taking a stroll. After flying for a while, the giant bird approached Zhou Wen and company. Only then did Zhou Wen and Li Xuan see that behind the giant bird was a row of chicks. The giant bird was like a golden cloud, but the chicks were about the size of a quail. Although their feathers were also golden, their color was lighter, and they didn't have such a strong luster. Apparently, their feathers hadn't fully grown. Zhou Wen counted and found a total of 6 chicks followed behind the giant bird. They flapped their wings and tried their best to maintain their flying postures, but it was extremely strenuous. They flew in all directions as though they could drop at any moment. The giant bird ignored them and continued flying in front. The 6 chicks tried their best to follow the giant bird up and down as they flapped their wings with all their might. This is the true descendant of a dimensional creature. This was the first time Zhou Wen had seen a dimensional creature's descendant. A companion egg wasn't a real egg but a form of life crystal. As they watched, the giant bird flew over with the chicks. When it was a few hundred meters away from the mountain path, Zhou Wen and Li Xuan felt a strong heat blast as though a scorching wind was hitting them. The sweat from their bodies intermediately oozed out. In a blink of an eye, their clothes were drenched. Because of Ah Sheng's reminder, neither of them dared make a sound. They sat in the car as though they were in a sauna. They were still somewhat worried, unsure if the giant bird was coming for them. Zhou Wen even wondered if their firm muscles had caught the fancy of the giant bird, making it decide to feed them to the chicks. Li Xuan and Zhou Wen looked at Ah Sheng, hoping to ask him what ideas he had. They were no match for such a monstrous creature. If they didn't flee now, it would be too late. Ah Sheng sat there without any reaction. He looked at the giant bird without a word, evidently having no intention of escaping. The two of them could only bite the bullet and sit still. After a while, the giant bird flew past the top of the mountain with the 6 chicks and ignored them. Clearly, they were only out practicing flying and weren't intentionally targeting them. Zhou Wen and Li Xuan secretly heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that the giant bird was about to fly over them. However, it was at this moment that something unexpected happened. An exhausted chick fell from the sky. Although it tried its best to flap its wings and control its body, it was unable to muster the required strength. It fell faster and faster. And coincidentally, the chick fell in the direction of their car. What do we do? Li Xuan and Zhou Wen looked at Ah Sheng. Ah Sheng obviously hadn't expected this to happen and the look on his face changed as well. However, he still sat motionlessly in the driver's seat and even gestured for their silence. The chick fell too quickly and just as Zhou Wen saw that Ah Sheng wasn't moving, the chick had already fallen on the roof of the car. With a loud thud, a huge dent was produced on the roof. Furthermore, a tiny hole had smashed through the roof. The chick's head and neck drooped down from the tiny hole as it shook in front of Zhou Wen and Li Xuan. Instantly, the air in the car seemed to freeze. Li Xuan robotically turned his head and exchanged a glance with Zhou Wen, seeing their worry in each other's eyes. This chick won't die here, right? Zhou Wen was very worried. If the chick really died here, would the giant bird vent its anger on them? Dimension creatures weren't humans, so they wouldn't reason with them. They could thank their lucky heavens if they weren't eaten by them, much less think about being given compensation for the car damage. Just as Zhou Wen was considering whether he should immediately jump out of the car to flee, he saw the chick's neck twitch before opening its eyes. It then looked at Zhou Wen and Li Xuan for a few seconds. Following that, they heard thumping sounds. The car's roof, which was made of special steel alloy, had been warped and dented. There were a few more holes as sharp objects pierced through the steel plate, allowing Zhou Wen and company to see tiny sharp hook-like talons. Precisely 6 sounds. Zhou Wen kept count as he listened to the thumping and knew that 6 chicks had landed on their roof. In the next second, before the sound could form an image in Zhou Wen's mind, the car trembled violently. Outside the shattered car window, a gigantic golden bird claw appeared. Then, Zhou Wen and company felt the car rapidly rise as it instantly rose into the sky. How can I be so unlucky? Zhou Wen felt that he never had a smooth trip when he went out. This time, he was ridiculously unlucky. Li Xuan could no longer hold his tongue, but Ah Sheng made a gesture a step ahead of him, indicating for him to remain silent and continue sitting. Soon, Zhou Wen and Li Xuan could already look down on the mountain. The entire car had been hoisted into the sky by the giant bird's claw. The chick exchanged looks with the humans for a few seconds before struggling a few times to pull its head out. But soon, Zhou Wen heard the piercing sound of steel being torn through. The roof of the car was quickly ripped off by a tiny talon, forming a bigger hole. The chick jumped in. Seeing the chick about to land on him, Zhou Wen thought of the tiny, tender talon that could easily tear apart special steel plates. This gave him the urge to rush from the vehicle to flee. Ah Sheng, who was in front, gestured for him to hold back. Clearly, he didn't want Zhou Wen to make any sudden movements. Zhou Wen hesitated for a moment before the chick landed on his leg. Unlike what he imagined, the chick was very light and was at most half a pound in weight. It didn't have any strength in its claws. Before Zhou Wen could decide on how to deal with the chick, a few more chicks had jumped down from the hole and landed on Zhou Wen and Li Xuan or into the back row of seats. Another chick landed on Li Xuan's head and stood perched there, as though it had no intention of moving. Li Xuan and Zhou Wen were equally depressed, but they didn't dare move. They had the urge to cry. The 6 chicks jumped around Zhou Wen and company and pecked them from time to time. However, they didn't really exert any strength, as though they were just curious. It's over, it's over. If this giant bird were to bring us back, we would definitely become their meal. Li Xuan lamented inwardly about his bad luck. Article 195 of 1597. Chapter 195. Tree halfway up the mountain. The 6 chicks happily bounced around in the car. They pecked here and there, looking around with curiosity. Zhou Wen and Li Xuan clearly weren't as relaxed as they were. They sat there motionless, afraid that they would anger them and incur the giant bird's wrath. At the same time, they were afraid that these chicks would suddenly think of trying to test the hardness of their beaks. Bam! Just as they were in thought, a chick suddenly threw a tantrum and pecked heavily at the car door. The car was bulletproof. A normal bomb couldn't even blast open the door, but the chick easily bore through a hole. Zhou Wen and Li Xuan's cold sweat instantly poured, mixing with the warm sweat that they were already soaked in. It was quite an indescribable feeling. Thankfully, the chicks didn't try their beaks on them. Zhou Wen was fine, but Li Xuan was a little unlucky. The chick that was standing above him actually pooped. Although it wasn't much, it made Li Xuan feel like dying. With another loud crash, the car shook violently. The golden bird's giant claw had vanished and the car had apparently landed on the ground. However, when Zhou Wen looked outside, he immediately realized that he was wrong. They hadn't landed on the ground at all. This was a mountain halfway up the mountain. The car had landed on a stone platform on the mountainside. It was neither up nor down. Unless their car could fly, it was impossible to drive away. Being able to drive away was secondary. Most importantly, it was whether they could return alive. Zhou Wen was considering how to survive when Li Xuan furtively tugged at the corner of his shirt and pointed outside the window. Zhou Wen looked in the direction he was pointing and was immediately alarmed. They were on the mountainside of a lone mountain peak, at least 700 to 800 meters off the ground. However, from Li Xuan's side, he could see the crown of a tree. A tree crown can be seen here. How tall is that tree? Zhou Wen found it unimaginable. Although there were many mutated plants in this era, Zhou Wen had never seen a tree that was 700 to 800 meters tall. If the height was converted into a building, it would be about 200 to 300 stories tall. The phoenix-like bird landed on the crown of the tree and let out a bird's cry. It made Zhou Wen feel like his ears were numb, buzzing so much that he couldn't hear anything. When the 6 chicks heard the giant bird's cry, they bounced out of the window and approached the giant bird on the tree crown. Only then did Zhou Wen realize that the huge bird didn't live on the mountain peak. Its nest was on the large tree. On the mountain stone platform, besides their car, there were also several other cars. There were SUVs and trucks too, and many things were scattered around them. There was a box of beverages, as well as some timber from a vehicle. All sorts of things were scattered on the platform, but no one could be seen. From the looks of it, it's not the first time that the giant bird has brought cars up here, but why isn't there anyone around? Where did the people in those cars go? Did they escape, or have they already found themselves in the giant bird's stomach? Zhou Wen guessed. While Zhou Wen was contemplating, the giant bird had already led the 6 chicks into a tree hole. At that moment, Ah Sheng lowered his voice and said, "That giant bird is too terrifying. We are no match for it, so make sure not to anger it." "Brother Sheng, there are epic creatures you can't deal with?" Li Xuan asked with a sliver of hope. "I may have means to deal with an epic creature, but it's hard to tell whether that's an epic creature or not," Ah Sheng said calmly. Li Xuan was immediately alarmed when he heard that. That can't be. Could it really be the mythical phoenix? "I don't know if it's a phoenix, but that tree should be the legendary parasol tree," Ah Sheng said as he looked at the giant tree outside. "The tree outside is the parasol tree. There's the saying that a phoenix nests in a parasol tree. Does that mean that the giant bird is really a phoenix?" Li Xuan was even more alarmed. "That's not necessarily the case. I once fought in the dimensional zones with the overseer and have previously seen parasol trees slightly smaller than this one elsewhere. It was an azure luan which was just half a step short of being a mythical creature. We suffered heavy losses in that battle and even the overseer suffered serious injuries. That's why we killed the azure luan and chopped down the parasol tree," Ah Sheng said. "Brother Sheng, what should we do now? Why don't we sneak down the mountain and escape at night?" Upon hearing Ah Sheng's words, Li Xuan felt even more afraid. Forget about these terrifying dimensional creatures. Even ordinary birds have better eyesight than humans. Daytime or nighttime doesn't make a difference to them. Ah Sheng scanned his surroundings and saw the cars and the things strewn on the ground. "You guys wait here. I'll go out and take a look." Ah Sheng then quietly got out of the car. He crawled forward like a snake, so quiet that he didn't even make a sound. In a short while, Ah Sheng returned with many things tucked under his arms. These drinks still have half a year of shelf life. From the looks of it, their owners weren't brought here too long ago. Now, there's no one here. If they haven't escaped, they are most likely in the giant bird's stomach. Ah Sheng handed the cans in his hand to Zhou Wen and Li Xuan. "Only after eating will we have the strength to flee. We don't have much time left. There are still a few dimensional zones to go. We also need to arrive in the Holy Land on time. We can't delay any further." Considering how the giant bird wasn't likely to exit the tree hole moments after returning, they decided to leave immediately. After drinking some of the beverages and eating some snacks to fill their stomachs, the 3 of them immediately got up and quietly headed for the edge of the cliff to take a look. Not only was the mountain steep, but the stone wall was also as smooth as a mirror. There was almost no place to rest one's feet. "It's too steep here. If I don't use my flying pets, I'm afraid I won't be able to get down," Li Xuan said with a sullen expression. "You can't use companion beasts. Dimension creatures are very territorial. If you use a companion beast, you will be making an enemy out of the giant bird, infuriating it in the process. Young Master Wen, can you go down by yourself?" Ah Sheng asked Zhou Wen. Yes. It wasn't difficult for Zhou Wen to head down. "Alright, then I'll carry Li Xuan. Let's head down together." After Ah Sheng said that, he crouched down and waited for Li Xuan to get on his back. "Brother Sheng, there's no need. There's really no need. I should be able to give it a try myself. There won't be much of a problem." Li Xuan hurriedly rejected Ah Sheng's good intentions. The 3 of them climbed down together. Their ascension of the mountain was abrupt, but their descent was dangerous. With Dragon Gate fairy skill, Zhou Wen was barely able to maintain his balance while descending. Zhou Wen crawled for a while and saw Li Xuan sweating profusely. However, it seemed as though he could still hang on. He subconsciously turned his head to look in the direction of the tree hole. What he saw left Zhou Wen in a state of shock. He had no idea that the giant bird was standing at the tree hole's entrance. Its eyes were coldly staring at him. Article 196 of 1597. Chapter 196 Four Gentlemen Blades. Ah Sheng and Li Xuan had clearly noticed it as well. They lay on the mountain wall, not daring to move. The giant bird spread its wings before violently flapping them once. An ominous foreboding rose in their minds when they felt a hurricane rise up and sweep their bodies up. Bam! 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 The three of them fell back onto the stone platform and saw stars. It took them a while before they could stand up. However, when they turned back to look at the tree hole in the towering tree, there was no sign of the giant bird. Looking everywhere, there was no trace of it. It was as though it had gone back inside. From the looks of it, it knew we were here long ago. Since it didn't kill us, why did it leave us here? Could it be that it treats us as a food stockpile and plans to keep us here for the new year? Li Xuan was still in the mood to joke. I don't know if it's keeping us for the new year, but it must have deliberately left us here, Zhou Wen said. Since it didn't kill us, we still have a chance. Let's think of other ways. Ah Sheng said as he looked around the platform. Since the giant bird had already targeted them, it was useless no matter how careful they were. Zhou Wen also circled the platform, hoping to find something useful. This item isn't bad. Li Xuan found a Playboy magazine in a cargo truck's compartment. Zhou Wen picked up a beverage bottle and saw that there was still more than a month left before it expired. He opened it to drink it and, as he did so, he arrived in front of an off-road vehicle. The off-road vehicle looked very old and had all its windows shattered. The frame was also severely deformed. The vehicle's body was covered in mud and it was about the same inside. It looked like it had suffered the elements and had been here for quite some time. Zhou Wen looked inside and saw a plush doll covered in mud sitting in the backseat. He thought the owner of this vehicle likely had a child on board. I wonder how they ended up. I hope they're all right. There was too much mud in the vehicle, so it didn't seem to have anything of use. Just as Zhou Wen was about to turn around and leave, he suddenly caught sight of a pole-like item caked in mud. Zhou Wen extended his hand and pulled the item out. It's really a saber. Zhou Wen wiped the mud away and revealed the true appearance of the object. It was a sheathed saber. The saber was straight, so its scabbard was also straight. Together with the hilt, it looked like a 4-foot-long stick. After wiping it clean, he realized that the entire saber's design was like a piece of bamboo segmented. The top segment was the hilt and the bottom 4 segments were the scabbard. If one looked closely, one would think that it was a bamboo stick. In fact, the hilt and scabbard were made of metal and it weighed heavily in the hand. Zhou Wen attempted to draw the blade but failed to pull it out. Zhou Wen, what are you doing? Li Xuan ran over and stared at the bamboo blade in Zhou Wen's hand. I found a saber, but I can't pull it out. Zhou Wen tried several times but failed to pull it out. He couldn't help but be surprised. He was very strong and could easily break steel bars. He was rather surprised that he couldn't pull out the bamboo blade. It looks like a bamboo stick no matter how you look at it. How is it a blade? Li Xuan commented as he looked at the bamboo blade in Zhou Wen's hand. No, that's a saber. Its name is Bamboo Blade. Ah Sheng heard their conversation and walked over, only to see it. He asked in surprise, where did you find this bamboo blade? It was inside this car. Zhou Wen pointed at the off-road vehicle and said, I wonder if it's stuck from rust. I can't pull out the blade. As Ah Sheng got into the off-road vehicle, he searched and said, the bamboo blade is made of primordial gold. Even the scabbard doesn't rust, much less the blade. This blade has a special design. You need to spin it counterclockwise to pull the blade out. Zhou Wen followed Ah Sheng's instructions and turned the handle. Although it was very heavy, it could really be rotated. When he exerted his force outwards, a portion of the blade immediately came out of the scabbard. The blade was like a deep pool of water that emitted a coldness. It was only 2 fingers wide and the back of the blade was slightly wider. Its sharp edge was extremely thin, making it feel like it could easily slice through anything. Zhou Wen pulled the blade out and swung it around. When the blade brushed past the car window to his side, it was sliced apart cleanly. Zhou Wen didn't sense any resistance from the blade's edge, showcasing its shocking sharpness. This blade is so sharp. Furthermore, it's made of primordial gold. Are there any left? Find one for me too. Li Xuan was also shocked by the sharpness of the bamboo blade. There's only one bamboo blade in the entire league. Where are you going to find another one? Ah Sheng crawled out from the off-road vehicle empty-handed. Clearly, he hadn't found anything. Are you serious? The Yin family has plenty of primordial gold ores. Isn't it easy to make one? Li Xuan said in disbelief. Primordial gold ores are restricted items. Every gram has a record. The League is very strict regarding this, so it's impossible for the Yin family to use them as they wish. Besides, this blade wasn't forged by the Yin family, Ah Sheng said as he looked at the bamboo blade in Zhou Wen's hand. Zhou Wen handed the bamboo blade to Ah Sheng and, after he took a careful look at the blade, Ah Sheng said, the blade is like a pool of water over an abyss. Deep beneath is nothing but blood. This is indeed the bamboo blade of the 4 gentlemen blades. I never expected that the bamboo blade that has been missing for so many years would actually be here. What are the 4 gentlemen blades? Why haven't I ever heard of them before? Li Xuan asked. Ah Sheng didn't answer Li Xuan. He gently swiped the blade across his palm and immediately sliced open a bloody gash. Blood trickled down the blade, forming a line that remained coagulated without dripping. Brother Sheng, what are you doing? Li Xuan and Zhou Wen looked at Ah Sheng in a daze. A gentleman doesn't fight, but if there's a need to fight, blood will definitely splatter. Hence, when the 4 gentleman blades are unsheathed, blood must be seen. Otherwise, it will deal harm to their masters. As Ah Sheng spoke, he swung the blade and threw blood on the blade out. The blade was spotless, like a pool of limpid water. After sheathing the blade, Ah Sheng returned it to Zhou Wen. Young Master Wen, although this blade is sharp, it's very inauspicious. It's best you don't use it if possible. Zhou Wen nodded and took the bamboo blade. He asked, who's the owner of this blade? Will someone come looking for me in the future? Ah Sheng shook his head and said, the person who used the blade has been dead for years. The 4 original owners of the plum, orchid, bamboo, and chrysanthemum blades all died tragically. Later on, when these 4 blades found themselves outside in the world, they gradually vanished. Their subsequent masters probably didn't have a good ending. What era are we in now? Why do we still believe in such superstitions? Aren't you a fool to not use such a good blade? Li Xuan said disapprovingly. Ah Sheng didn't argue with him and said, the overseer's father, old Master Yin, was once the owner of the plum blade. Upon hearing that, Li Xuan immediately fell silent. And Tianzuo's father, Ouyanglan's ex-husband, was once the head of the Yin family with a promising future. Despite his bright future, he died early due to an accident. It was regretful and was known by all the rich and powerful in Luang. Li Xuan naturally knew. If this was really the inauspiciousness brought about by the 4 gentleman blades, it was really terrifying. Article 197 of 1597. The owner of this blade might be like Uscoat and brought here by the giant bird. There's a high chance that they were eaten by that giant bird. From the looks of it, this blade is truly inauspicious. Zhou Wen, it's best you throw it away, Li Xuan said. However, Ah Sheng said, once the blade is in hand, you're its owner. It's too late to throw it away now. You should bring it along. Zhou Wen nodded without a word. He wasn't superstitious to begin with, so he naturally didn't mind. The trio searched the platform for a while longer before finding 2 companion eggs in the trunk of a car. However, they were only at the legendary stage and didn't look like they were worth much. Realizing that the giant bird hadn't appeared the entire time, the trio decided to secretly escape from another side, but before they could go far, they felt a hot gust of wind assault them. They were once again swept back onto the platform. This time, they didn't even see the giant bird. After that, they made a few more attempts and even tried to escape by jumping down the mountain. However, the result was the same. The hot gust of wind blew them back onto the platform. The next morning, before the sun rose above the horizon, the giant bird brought 6 chicks out of the tree hole and led them to the mountaintop. Zhou Wen and company originally imagined that they would fly away like before, but to their surprise, the giant bird only brought the 6 chicks to the mountaintop. Then, they formed a line before jumping off the mountain peak like diving athletes. As they learned how to fly, they charged towards the platform. Zhou Wen saw a chick charging towards him and was about to dodge to the side when he felt a force overwhelming him. It impelled him to meet the chick and catch it. Soon, Zhou Wen and company knew the intentions of the giant bird. It had actually treated Zhou Wen and company as workers. They were to catch its 6 children while they practiced flying swoops. A day ago, Zhou Wen never imagined that he would be a nanny and trainer of 6 chicks. What left Zhou Wen even more depressed was that the birds seemed to always target him and fly towards him. They seldom flew towards Ah Sheng and Li Xuan. Li Xuan gloated by the side and said, Old Zhou, it looks like you have quite good social relations. No, maybe I should say you have better Twitter relations. Those chicks love you. If you were this good with women, you would have long been in a relationship. The chicks practiced flying the entire day. These fellows had extremely strong physiques and talent, but as they had just been born, they were unable to perfectly control their bodies. That was why they appeared rather clumsy. However, they improved extremely quickly. With just a day's practice, their body control had increased tremendously. In the morning, they were still staggering in flight. Not only did they not land on Zhou Wen, they even missed and flew past the stone platform. By the evening, the chicks could accurately land on Zhou Wen's head. When the sun set, the giant bird returned to the tree hole with the chicks. Zhou Wen believed that he could finally relax, but to his surprise, the giant bird flapped its wing, stirring up a gust of wind that pulled him into the tree hole. Ah Sheng's reaction was extremely fast as he grabbed Zhou Wen, but with his strength, he couldn't hold him back. His feet drew 2 long ditches on the stone platform and he was almost thrown off the stone platform. This bird sure is sinister. It made us nannies in the day and food at night. Li Xuan also pounced forward to grab Zhou Wen. However, it was useless. The giant bird's wings flapped once again as the 3 of them were sent flying into the hole. It's over, it's over. We'll definitely be food for the birds this time. Li Xuan cried out tragically. The tree hole was very deep. When Zhou Wen and company landed on the ground, they felt the force retract, preventing them from slamming heavily to the ground. Stop shouting. These birds don't eat meat, Ah Sheng looked around and said. How do you know they don't eat meat? Li Xuan refused to believe it. There's no smell of blood here, nor are there any bones or anything like that. Instead, there are a lot of fruits here. Ah Sheng pointed to a corner of the tree hole. There were indeed many fruits piled there. So they don't eat meat. That's good, that's good. Li Xuan heaved a long sigh of relief. However, Zhou Wen didn't look at the fruits. He raised his head and looked up with a strange expression. The tree hole was nearly 100 meters tall, like a huge warehouse. In the sky of the tree hole floated a golden oval object. If one looked closely, one would realize that it was a cocoon made of silk. Zhou Wen had seen two similar cocoons, but they were white while this one above him was golden. That can't be. There's actually a cocoon here. Zhou Wen carefully looked at the golden cocoon. The more he looked at it, the more it looked like the two cocoons he had seen apart from the different color. Could it be that these dimensional creatures are actually born out of cocoons? Zhou Wen found it odd. Why did these different dimensional creatures have a cocoon in their nests? Up to this point, only Golden Flying Ant was the weakest of dimensional creatures with cocoons. The other two were ridiculously strong. There was no need to mention the dragon-shaped creature wrapped around the stone pillar in Dragon's Well. It was unimaginable. Likewise for this giant bird. Ah Sheng was also one of the top experts in the epic stage, yet he did not seem to have much ability to resist the giant bird. Of course, it was also possible that Ah Sheng wasn't planning on giving his all unless death was certain. Li Xuan and Ah Sheng followed Zhou Wen's gaze and saw the golden cocoon. Li Xuan exclaimed in surprise, "Strange, why is there a cocoon here?" No one could answer him as the giant bird landed with 6 chicks. This sight made Li Xuan's heart tighten and he was in no mood to care what the cocoon was. The giant bird landed on a charred piece of wood and squawked at Zhou Wen and company, causing their eardrums to ring. The trio didn't understand bird language, nor did they have telepathic abilities. They didn't know what the giant bird meant, but just as they were hesitating, they saw that each of the 6 chicks had something in their mouths. They flapped their wings and flew diagonally to Zhou Wen, placing the things in their mouths at his feet. Zhou Wen originally believed that these chicks were afraid that their trainer would starve to death, so they brought him fruits to eat. But upon closer inspection, he realized that the 6 chicks didn't bring fruit, but instead, they were shards that resembled jade. The 6 shards were all different shapes, but the material looked about the same. It was a translucent jade that was close to beige in color. Why are you giving me this? I'm not a Western dragon or a woman. I don't like shiny things. I'd rather receive fruits, Zhou Wen thought. Article 198 of 1597. Chapter 198 Shard Choice. These look like eggshell shards. Ah Sheng carefully examined the shards and said after a moment of thought. Eggshell shards. Zhou Wen carefully inspected the 6 shards and indeed, they looked like irregular shapes after an eggshell cracked. Furthermore, the shards all had some curvature, making Zhou Wen even more certain that Ah Sheng was right. These shards were likely the eggshells of the 6 chicks. But why are they bringing me their eggshells? Can it be that they want to treat me to eggshells? I can eat bird eggs, but I can't eat eggshells. Zhou Wen felt depressed. Ignoring the fact that they couldn't understand him, he coughed lightly and said to them, "Thank you for your kind intentions. I don't eat eggshells. You should put them away." It was unknown if they didn't understand him or if there were other reasons. The 6 chicks stood in front of Zhou Wen in a line as they stared at him with widened eyes as though they hadn't heard him. When Zhou Wen saw that they weren't moving, he knew that he couldn't continue the standstill. Hence, he picked up an eggshell and said, "I just need one piece. I'll take it back and slowly eat it." Zhou Wen pinched the eggshell and found it smooth and supple. It was warm to the touch and resembled legendary warm jade. If he hadn't seen these chicks before, no one would have expected it to be an eggshell shard. As Zhou Wen spoke, he placed the shard in his pocket, hoping that he would be able to bluff his way through. He never expected things to work out. Upon seeing Zhou Wen grab a shard, the other 5 chicks ran back with their respective shards in their mouths. Only the chick that Zhou Wen had taken a shard from stood in its original spot as it stared blankly at Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen finally heaved a sigh of relief. If the chicks were determined to make him eat the eggshell, Zhou Wen would have to make a last stand in battle despite knowing that he was no match for them. He really couldn't swallow something like that. I wonder what other tricks these chicks have up their sleeves. Just as Zhou Wen was pondering over the matter, he saw the giant bird perched on a piece of charred wood. It spread its wings and, immediately, a hot wind swept the 3 of them up like a tornado, throwing them out of the tree hole. The trio felt as though they were riding on floating clouds, and their vision was filled with distorted golden light. When the terrifying power disappeared, they fell to the ground and realized that there was no parasol tree in front of them. Instead, they were on a mountain path. There were also collision signs along the mountain railings. It was where they had stopped their car earlier. Li Xuan looked around but did not see any sign of the giant bird. He could not help but exclaim in pleasant surprise, "We have returned to our original spot. Did that giant bird actually release us?" Zhou Wen was also delighted, but when he suddenly heard a bird's cry, he couldn't help but feel his heart turn cold. He imagined that the giant bird was here again, but on careful thought, he felt that something was amiss. The bird's cry was clearly very tender and lacked a terrifying might. It wasn't the giant bird's cry, but more like a chick's. Zhou Wen looked down and saw a chick standing by his feet in a daze. It was looking at him with its head cocked. Why was this chick swept away with us? Zhou Wen was alarmed, but on second thought, he felt that this might not be a mistake made by the giant bird. Zhou Wen had already found it odd that the 6 chicks had brought him shards. Back then, he hadn't thought too much about it, but he had a lot more thoughts once he saw the chick had also been sent away with him. Don't tell me I was choosing these chicks back when I took the shard. The chick I chose will leave with me. If that's the case, what would happen if I had taken all 6 of them? Zhou Wen reached out to pick up the chick, which didn't resist. It allowed Zhou Wen to hold it in his hand as it cocked its head and stared at Zhou Wen with its round eyes. Old Zhou, did the giant bird give this chick to you? That's not fair. We did the work together, so why is it that only you received a present while brother Sheng and I have nothing? Li Xuan also noticed the crux of the problem. I still don't know if it's a blessing or a calamity. Zhou Wen shook his head slightly and shouted towards the mountain range with the chick in hand, Divine bird, are you letting me take it away? After shouting 3 times without receiving any response, Zhou Wen had no choice but to take the chick along with him. Without a car, the trio could only walk on foot. Although they could run as fast as cars, a human wasn't a machine. With limited stamina, they would be drained of their strength if they ran for a long time. And in the wilderness of the mountainous region, with them near Qin Mountain, they would be in for a bad time if they encountered dimensional creatures while lacking strength. The trio didn't dare to run too fast either. They alternated between walking and running. Originally, Ah Sheng had planned on taking them to a dimensional zone near Qin Mountain, but because of a lack of vehicle and no phone signal here, he had no choice but to abandon his previous plans and rush to the next city as quickly as possible. Ah Sheng told Zhou Wen that if they didn't arrive at the next city in time, the Yin family would send a search and rescue team to seek them out. Therefore, they had to come into contact with the Yin family as soon as possible. Qin Mountain was just too mysterious. Although they were only close to it and had yet to really enter it, they had already seen many mysterious objects. That night, Zhou Wen and company heard the sound of immortal music coming from Qin Mountain. It sounded like fairies were playing music and dancing inside. Although Zhou Wen wished to take a look, he knew that he couldn't take the risk. Along the way, he saw many plants that he had never seen before, mushrooms that were taller than buildings, grass that resembled humans. There were all sorts of strange things happening. And this was only the periphery of Qin Mountain. Although they encountered many strange incidents along the way, nothing serious happened after encountering the giant bird. The 3 of them finally traversed Qin Mountain and arrived at a small city. Ah Sheng contacted the Yin family and gave them a timely update of the situation, stopping the search and rescue team that the Yin family had already prepared to send. Our original plan was to let you first head to a few dimensional zones to train, but it's too late now. We've already chartered a plane, and it will be taking us to the Holy Land in a while, Ah Sheng said to Zhou Wen and Li Xuan after the call ended. Zhou Wen and Li Xuan felt that it was better to head directly to the Holy Land to prevent themselves from encountering further troubles. After realizing the terror of the giant bird, they didn't dare to casually wander about in the wilderness. After resting for half a day, an armed helicopter came to pick them up and took them to a large city with an airport. Then, they flew to the Holy City. As many regions in the sky were enveloped by dimensional zones, planes couldn't fly randomly. Most of the air routes they had used in the past were no longer usable. Very few regions allowed passage. Now, the airports had been taken over by the League government, and the members of the aircrew were military officers. Article 199 of 1597. Holy City was the highest administrative center of the League. It was also the world center that humanity had built after the dimensional storms. The reason it was named Holy City was that the 6 League heroes had obtained their powerful physiques in Holy Land. With immense power, they had been able to suppress the generation of those times and establish a fixed political system, reducing the suffering that war and disaster brought to humanity. The trio arrived at Holy City, a new city that was only built after the dimensional storms. The architectural style was different from the old cities like Guide City and Luang. It looked modern and there were statues of 6 heroes everywhere on the streets. As heroes who saved humanity from the chaos and disaster, they had received the highest honor in the League. All the citizens of the League remembered their names forever. However, this wasn't a good thing for Zhou Wen because the descendants of the 6 heroes were likely to go against him. Ignoring the grudges between Tianzuo and the 6 hero families, just the grudge between Zhou Wen and the Kapim family was unlikely to be resolved so easily. Ah Sheng had booked a room for Zhou Wen and Li Xuan to stay in. After he settled them in, he began handling the administrative matters needed for entering the Holy Land. As they had been delayed at Qin Mountain for a few days, most of the youths participating in the competition had already arrived. Zhou Wen and Li Xuan were considered the last 2. Minister, Zhou Wen has arrived in Holy City and has checked into Goth Hotel. Liz's eyes shimmered as she clenched her fists tightly. Liz could still endure having her primordial energy sea crippled, but John's humiliation made her wish she could immediately charge over and kill Zhou Wen. I already know. With Sheng by his side, and with them being the League's invitees at the Holy Land, it's not appropriate for us to take Zhou Wen into custody so brazenly. Just as we said, contact the youths from the other families who will be participating in the competition and get them to take care of Zhou Wen inside the Holy Land, Qiao Xiaoan said. Don't worry, Minister. Even if I don't do it, the other families won't let Zhou Wen off easily. Back then, in Tianzuo crippled 6 hero family's generation of youths, and now with Zhou Wen representing the Yin family, everyone is rubbing their hands in glee. They want to cripple him just like what in Tianzuo did back then, Liz said. Zhou Wen isn't a simple person. He was able to defeat John despite him using light of judgment. With such strength, not many people, including those from the 6 hero families, would be able to do it. Besides, the Yin family naturally has some confidence if they dare send him here. It's best you contact the other families to ensure that nothing goes wrong with this plan. Qiao Xiaoan wasn't as optimistic as Liz. Don't worry. I've already contacted a few people who are closer to my family to take action with John. There won't be any problems, Liz said confidently. This is the Holy Land, not the Yin family's Luong. Zhou Wen won't be able to escape this time. Qiao Xiaoan tilted his head and paused before asking, have you contacted Lance? No, he has been missing recently. I don't know where he's gone. I'm afraid he will not return until the day the Holy Land opens, Liz said. Try your best to contact him. If Lance were to take action, everything would be fine, Qiao Xiaoan said. With this being his first time in Holy City, Li Xuan went out shopping. He said that he wanted to see how different Holy City was from Luong. However, Zhou Wen wasn't interested and chose to game in his room. Zhou Wen had used his phone's camera function to look at the bamboo blade and the eggshell shard, but he had failed to discover anything special. Since he couldn't lock onto the two items, he naturally couldn't bring them in-game. Zhou Wen had no choice but to place them in the Chaos Bead space. Zhou Wen had originally planned on using the power of the Chaos Bead to raise the first order of Chaos to the legendary stage to see what life providence he would obtain. However, the Chaos Bead did not produce any light or text. Zhou Wen had no way of advancing himself. The chick kept hopping on the table. Zhou Wen had bought some fruits for it, but it didn't eat much. Over the past few days, the chick didn't eat much nor did it drink much water. However, it still looked energetic without showing any signs of frailty. Zhou Wen originally planned on grinding a few instance dungeons to see if he could raise all his stats to 20, but the chick didn't sit still. It jumped onto him and kept peeping noisily. When he ignored it, it jumped onto his head and pecked him on the head with its beak. What are you trying to do? Zhou Wen removed the chick from his head and questioned it gloomily. Initially, he thought that it was pointless speaking to it since it wouldn't be able to understand him. To his surprise, the chick actually understood him and jumped onto the table. Using its mouth, it flipped open a magazine to one of the pages, pressing its claw onto it. Zhou Wen looked curiously and saw that the chick's claw was pressing down on an advertisement. Span the advertisement's content was actually the auctioning of a companion span egg. You want to eat this? Zhou Wen asked the chick in shock. The chick understood his words and immediately nodded. I don't have that, but I do have a legendary companion egg. Make do with it. Zhou Wen took out a legendary companion egg and placed it in front of the chick. It was something he had discovered in a damaged car on the stone platform. Seeing the chick's look of contempt, Zhou Wen added, that is a rare epic companion egg. I don't have the money to buy it for you. Don't even think about it. Just make do with this one. If you don't eat it, you won't even have one. Seeing the number of zeros on the starting bid, Zhou Wen lost all interest. Even he didn't need such a good companion beast, so it was a little too much to let the chick eat it. The chick glared at Zhou Wen before eventually lowering its head in resignation and pecked at the companion egg. It sporadically pecked at it, as though it was very unwilling to eat. Zhou Wen had no choice. To feed it with a legendary companion egg already pained his heart. It was impossible for him to obtain an epic stage companion egg. After resting for 2 days, Ah Sheng took them to the entrance of the Holy Land for registration. When they arrived, many young people had already finished registering. When Zhou Wen went to register, the official in charge of confirming the candidate read out Luong and family. This drew the gazes of all the youths present. A few of them even began cracking their knuckles. Standing in the crowd, John stared coldly at Zhou Wen as the killing intent flickered in his eyes. Old Zhou, it looks like we are very popular. Li Xuan also noticed that something was amiss, but he deliberately retorted. Article 200 of 1597. Chapter 200 Thunder God General. Indeed. I'm just afraid that their passion will be unbearable when the time comes, Zhou Wen said indifferently. The Yin family actually didn't send in Jing. What's the meaning behind sending an outsider? Are they afraid? A stern-looking youth in black asked. The Yin family is smart. They didn't send one of their own out of fear and got an outsider to let us vent our anger. Another handsome young man with blonde hair wore a look of disdain. It looks like apart from in Tianzuo, there aren't many talents in the Yin family. They actually found an outsider to enter the Holy Land. I feel sorry for the Yin family. Zhou Wen could tell from the number of youths speaking that he was in trouble this time. Young Master Wen, if you don't wish to participate, it's still not too late for you to quit. Madam has said that you should act according to the circumstances and don't force it, Ah Sheng whispered to Zhou Wen. Since I've agreed to come, I can only take the challenge even if there's a sea of fire ahead of me. There's no reason for me to return now. Although Zhou Wen spoke beautifully, he really didn't wish to get involved if not for his attempt to see if the special physiques could enhance his physical stats. Of course, he had to return the favor he owed. No matter what, he had to enter the Holy Land to take a look. Ignoring the mockery and sarcasm of those people, Zhou Wen's gaze constantly observed the so-called Holy Land, hoping to find the tiny palm symbol. The so-called Holy Land was different from what Zhou Wen imagined. It didn't have any magnificent ancient buildings or immortal-like paradises. In a desolate desert, there was an ancient and worn-out stone platform. The stone platform was hexagonal and every edge had a stone pillar. The 6 stone pillars had different symbols engraved on them. Even the carving techniques and styles were different, as though they were made by 6 different kinds of craftsmen. Unfortunately, Zhou Wen failed to see any tiny palm symbol despite using Truth Listener to observe his surroundings for quite a while. Shut up. This isn't a wet market. Whoever spouts any more nonsense will be disqualified. The official coldly stopped everyone and continued, before coming here, your family has already informed you of the rules of the Holy Land. However, I still have to repeat them one more time. Everyone who enters the Holy Land does so voluntarily. If any mishaps happen in the Holy Land, it has nothing to do with the organizers of this trial. In other words, even if you die inside, no one will be responsible for it. With that said, the official looked at Zhou Wen and continued, if anyone wishes to quit now, they can immediately make the request to not enter the Holy Land. However, once anyone enters the Holy Land, they need to be responsible for their actions. Good luck to them. Everyone knew very well that the official's words were directed at Zhou Wen. With so many people targeting him, Zhou Wen probably wouldn't have a good time after entering the Holy Land. The chances of death were much higher than the others. Seeing that Zhou Wen had no intention of backing out, the official continued, since no one plans on quitting, this year's holy battle will officially begin. In a while, the companion egg market will begin business. If anyone needs a companion egg, you can purchase it. For the next 24 hours, you can enter the Holy Land at any time. As for whether you can leave the Holy Land alive, it will depend on your fate. After the official spoke, the trading market opened for business. Many merchants had set up stalls. On the stalls were various companion eggs. They were basically at the legendary stage. Zhou Wen saw a few brands he was familiar with. They were all famous companion eggs retailers in the league. Young Master Wen, feel free to choose any companion egg you need. Madam has already prepared sufficient funds. It should be enough to buy all the companion eggs you need. Therefore, you don't have to worry about money, said Ah Sheng. There's no need. I'll just use my companion beasts, Zhou Wen said. Although the companion beasts that a person could obtain were unlimited, having a large number of them would be difficult to command in battle. It would be fine if a companion beast had high intelligence, but most companion beasts had low intelligence. If they were left to attack on their own, they would be a bunch of disorderly mobsters. They might not be able to use their powers and might even hinder each other. Therefore, most people focused on training a few companion beasts, ones that they could use with the greatest ease. Zhou Wen was already very adept at using his companion beasts. Furthermore, they were considered top-notch existences at the legendary stage. It was enough. Madam was right. Indeed, you aren't willing to buy companion eggs. As Ah Sheng spoke, he took out a box and handed it to Zhou Wen. At the same time, he solemnly said, before I left, I was specifically instructed to hand it to you. Madam said that you can choose not to have any other companion egg, but this one was personally obtained by her in a dimensional zone. She said that you have to accept it no matter what. Otherwise, she will make you accompany her for meals daily when you return. Miss Jing will also join the meals. Sis Lan sure is thoughtful. Zhou Wen didn't reject the offer and took the box. He didn't like the Yin siblings, but he wasn't averse to Ouyang Lan. Since Ouyang Lan had said so, Zhou Wen didn't reject the item. When he opened it, he saw a black companion egg the size of a fist inside. It looked like metal, but it also had the luster of jade. What kind of companion egg is this? Zhou Wen looked inside the box, but there was no information card. Madam didn't tell me. She only said that you would know after you hatch it, Ah Sheng said. Zhou Wen nodded but didn't immediately incubate it. He stored it away in his backpack and said to Ah Sheng, I'll accept the companion egg. I'll find an opportunity to hatch it in the future. Don't worry. Zhou Wen had a Dao body and his primordial energy recovery speed was extremely fast. He could incubate legendary companion eggs at any time, so he didn't have to worry about the danger of expending too much of his primordial energy. Alright, now that your matters have been resolved, and since you aren't buying companion eggs, why don't you accompany me to take a look? I don't have as many excellent grade companion eggs as you do. This is a good opportunity for me. Who knows, I might be able to obtain a few. Li Xuan pulled Zhou Wen towards the market. Li Xuan's words weren't wild fantasy. In fact, as long as he had enough money, he could buy legendary companion beasts that were usually rarely seen. In order to leave an impression on these young people who could lead a future generation, many of the excellent grade companion eggs were put on sale here. Zhou Wen couldn't help but be astonished when he followed Li Xuan around. He had never heard of many of the companion eggs here, but from their introductions, many of them had very useful abilities. They were in no way inferior to the mutated demonized general before it underwent a fusion. The companion eggs here were basically at that level. The prices were also astronomical and were at least twice the price of a typical companion egg shop. Even so, many young people who were prepared to enter the Holy Land spent a huge sum of money to buy companion eggs. Their expressions remained stoic as though what they were spending wasn't money. Thunder God General. There's actually a Thunder God General here. Suddenly, a voice sounded, attracting the attention of many. Article 201 of 1597.